Shaquille O'Neal had to eat his words, and it was captured on live television for millions to see. The NBA legend, known for his massive ego and reluctance to admit mistakes, was forced to publicly acknowledge that he had completely misjudged a 22-year-old Turkish center named Alperen Şengün. What happened between these two players over the course of 18 months would become one of the most dramatic reversals of opinion in recent NBA history. And it all started with some harsh words that Shaq probably wishes he could take back. It was October 2022, and Shaquille O'Neal was doing what he does best on TNT's Inside the NBA, offering his unfiltered opinions about the league he once dominated. The topic of conversation was the Houston Rockets' young roster, and specifically their decision to build around Alperen Şengün as their franchise center. Shaq's reaction was immediate and brutal. "This kid ain't it," Shaq declared, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had won 4 NBA championships and dominated the center position for over a decade. "I'm watching him play, and he's soft. He's not strong enough, he's not athletic enough, and he definitely ain't going to survive in this league playing like that." But Shaq wasn't finished, with co-hosts Charles Barkley, Ernie Johnson, and Kenny Smith listening. The Big Diesel continued his assessment. "The Rockets are making a mistake building around this guy. Centers in this league need to be physical, need to dominate the paint. This kid is trying to play like a point guard in a center's body, and that's not going to work at this level." The criticism was particularly harsh because it came from someone whose opinion carried enormous weight in basketball circles. Shaq wasn't just any former player offering commentary. He was one of the most dominant centers in NBA history, someone who had redefined what it meant to play the position. Charles Barkley, never one to back down from controversy, pushed back slightly. "Shaq, the game has evolved. Maybe you need to evolve with it." But Shaq was unmoved. "Chuck, I don't care how much the game has evolved. Certain fundamentals don't change. This kid is going to get eaten alive by real centers in this league." What made Shaq's criticism particularly damaging was the timing. Alperen was entering just his second NBA season, still trying to establish himself as a legitimate starter in the league. For a player still building his confidence and reputation, having one of basketball's most respected legends publicly question his ability was devastating. The comments went viral immediately. NBA analysts began debating whether Shaq was right. Basketball fans on social media picked sides. Some defended Alperen, pointing to his unique skill set and basketball IQ. Others agreed with Shaq, arguing that the young Turkish player looked overwhelmed against elite competition. But the criticism that hurt most came from an unexpected source. Other NBA centers began echoing Shaq's sentiments. During interviews throughout the 2022-23 season, several veteran big men made comments suggesting that Alperen would struggle to compete at the highest level. "Shaq's not wrong," said one Western Conference center who requested anonymity. "The kid has skills, but this is a man's league. You can't succeed at center just by being crafty." The pressure on Alperen was immense. Every game became a referendum on whether Shaq's assessment was correct. Every poor performance was scrutinized as evidence that the NBA legend had been right all along. Meanwhile, Shaq continued to double down on his criticism. During subsequent TNT broadcasts, he would regularly point out Alperen's struggles, using them as evidence to support his original assessment. "See what I'm talking about," Shaq said after a game where Alperen shot poorly. "Kid's not ready for this level of competition." The moment that began to change, everything happened on December 19, 2022, during a nationally televised game between the Houston Rockets and the Philadelphia 76ers. Alperen was matched up against Joel Embiid, one of the league's most dominant centers, and a player who embodied many of the qualities Shaq had said were essential for success. On paper, it looked like a mismatch that would prove Shaq's point. Embiid was bigger, stronger, more athletic, and more experienced. Most analysts predicted that the Sixers star would dominate the matchup, providing clear evidence that Alperen wasn't ready to compete against elite centers. Instead, Alperen put on a clinic. Using his basketball IQ, passing ability, and surprising mobility, he neutralized many of Embiid's advantages while exploiting weaknesses in the Sixers' defense. Alperen finished the game with 24 points, 14 rebounds, and 7 assists. While Embiid struggled to find rhythm against Houston's defensive scheme built around their young center. But it wasn't just the statistics that impressed observers, it was how Alperen played. He showed patience, composure, and a level of basketball sophistication that contradicted Shaq's assessment of him as unprepared for elite competition. The performance caught the attention of basketball analysts, who began to question whether Shaq's evaluation had been too harsh. However, the Big Diesel himself remained unconvinced. "One game doesn't make a career," Shaq said during the next Inside the NBA broadcast. "Let's see him do that consistently before we start crowning him." What happened over the next several months was remarkable. Alperen didn't just improve, he transformed into one of the most effective centers in the NBA. His numbers steadily climbed as he gained confidence and experience. By the All-Star break, Alperen was averaging 18 points, 10 rebounds, and 6 assists per game, numbers that placed him among the elite two-way centers in the league. More importantly, the Rockets were winning games they weren't supposed to win, largely because of his impact on both ends of the court. The basketball community began to take notice. NBA veterans who had initially been skeptical started praising Alperen's development. Coaches around the league spoke about the difficulty of preparing for Houston because of his unique skill set. "He's not what you expect from a center," said one Eastern Conference coach. "He can beat you in so many different ways. Passing, shooting, post moves, basketball IQ. You have to prepare for him like you would a point guard, but he's 7 feet tall." Meanwhile, Shaq remained largely silent about Alperen's improvement. During TNT broadcasts, he would acknowledge good performances but stopped short of admitting he had been wrong in his initial assessment. This changed dramatically during a game in March 2023, when Alperen faced off against Nikola Jokić, the reigning NBA MVP and a player Shaq had publicly praised for his unique combination of size and skill. The matchup between Alperen and Jokić on March 15, 2023, was billed as a clash between two of the league's most skilled big men. Basketball fans were excited to see how the young Turkish center would fare against the established superstar. What they witnessed was a masterclass in center play from Alperen. He matched Jokić shot for shot, pass for pass, and defensive play for defensive play. The game went to overtime, with both centers putting up spectacular numbers in a thrilling contest that showcased the evolution of the center position in modern basketball. Alperen finished with 29 points, 13 rebounds, and 9 assists, just 1 assist shy of a triple-double against the reigning MVP. More importantly, he had proven that he could compete with and even outplay the league's best centers on the biggest stage. The performance was so impressive that it forced even Shaq's harshest critics to acknowledge that something special was happening in Houston. But it was what happened after the game that really caught everyone's attention. During the post-game interview, Alperen was asked about the criticism he had received early in his career, including Shaq's comments. His response was measured and respectful. "I understand why people questioned whether I could succeed in this league. I didn't look like a typical center, but I always believed that basketball is about more than just size and athleticism. It's about understanding the game and making your teammates better." The clip of his interview went viral, with many praising his maturity and professionalism in handling criticism from NBA legends. The moment everyone had been waiting for came during the next Inside the NBA broadcast, just 2 days after Alperen's dominant performance against Jokić. The producers had clearly prepared a segment about the young center's development, and all eyes were on Shaq to see how he would respond. What happened next shocked everyone, including his co-hosts. "I gotta say something," Shaq began, his voice carrying a rare tone of humility. "I was wrong about that kid in Houston. Dead wrong." The studio fell silent. Charles Barkley, Kenny Smith, and Ernie Johnson all looked surprised. It was rare for Shaq to admit being wrong about anything, let alone do so publicly on national television. "When I first watched Alperen Şengün play, I judged him based on what I thought a center should be," Shaq continued. "I was looking for someone who played like me, someone who used size and strength to dominate. But this kid showed me something different. He showed me that you can impact winning in ways I never imagined." But Shaq wasn't finished. In a moment that would become one of the most talked about segments in Inside the NBA history, he offered something even rarer, a genuine apology. "I want to apologize to that young man," Shaq said, looking directly into the camera. "My criticism was unfair and based on outdated thinking. Alperen Şengün is a special player, and I should have recognized that sooner." The reaction was immediate and overwhelming. Social media exploded with clips of Shaq's admission. Basketball fans who had been critical of his initial assessment praised him for his willingness to acknowledge his mistake. Shaq's public reversal had profound effects that extended far beyond one television segment. For Alperen, it represented a form of validation that money couldn't buy. Having one of basketball's greatest players acknowledge not just his talent, but also admit to being wrong about him, was a career-defining moment. The admission also sparked broader conversations about how the game of basketball was evolving, and how traditional expectations for certain positions might need to be reconsidered. Shaq's willingness to change his mind became a symbol of the NBA's ongoing transformation. For the Houston Rockets, Shaq's endorsement provided external validation of their decision to build around Alperen. It also helped solidify the young center's status as a legitimate franchise cornerstone, making it easier for the organization to commit long-term resources to his development. But perhaps most importantly, the incident demonstrated something valuable about both players involved. Alperen had shown remarkable maturity and professionalism in handling criticism, while Shaq had shown the humility and growth that comes with truly great leadership. Today, when people talk about Alperen Şengün's rise to NBA stardom, Shaq's reversal is often mentioned as a turning point, not because external validation defined his success, but because it represented a moment when traditional basketball thinking evolved to embrace new possibilities. For Shaq, the episode became an example of how even legends can learn and grow. His willingness to admit being wrong publicly earned him respect from fans who appreciated his honesty and humility. The relationship between the two players has since evolved into one of mutual respect. Shaq regularly praises Alperen during broadcasts, while the young center has spoken about learning from criticism and using it as motivation to improve. In the end, the story of Shaq and Alperen isn't just about one player proving another wrong. It's about the evolution of basketball, the importance of keeping an open mind, and the power of admitting when we need to change our perspectives. Sometimes the greatest victories aren't about proving others wrong. They're about inspiring others to see the game and the world in new ways.